No one expected chaos at 38,000 feet. Flight 9-1 had been nothing but routine, scheduled to depart at 7:15 a.m. A full cabin of 180 passengers, clear skies, no turbulence reports, and nothing in the weather radar to suggest trouble. Families, business travelers, and a few vacationers settled into their seats, chatting quietly, scrolling through phones, or adjusting headphones. Flight attendants smiled professionally, performing their usual pre-flight safety demonstration as Captain Elena Cross's calm voice echoed over the PA system. Her tone was steady, almost comforting, as if speaking to the passengers would somehow guarantee smooth skies. Elena had been flying for more than 15 years. She had seen thunderstorms, equipment malfunctions, and the kind of delays that test even the most patient traveler. But she had never faced anything like this, at least, not on a commercial airliner. She had a reputation among her peers as precise, disciplined, and unshakable. But even the most experienced pilots cannot fully prepare for the impossible. Within moments, what had been an ordinary flight became a nightmare. The engines, both of them, failed simultaneously. It started with a subtle tremor beneath her hands on the yoke, almost imperceptible at first. Then came the shriek, high-pitched, mechanical, alarming. The cockpit warning lights erupted in red and amber flashes, each one demanding her immediate attention. Oxygen masks dropped from the overhead compartments, dangling like fragile lifelines. The hum of air conditioning died. Panic spread through the cabin like wildfire. Passengers screamed. Some instinctively clutched their loved ones. Others froze in shock, unable to process what was happening. A baby wailed incessantly in the rear. Flight attendants struggled to calm passengers, their voices barely audible over the alarms. In the cockpit, Elena's co-pilot muttered something she barely registered. Her mind was elsewhere, running through procedures by instinct, muscle memory, and the intense clarity that only comes in moments of life or death. She didn't speak much. She didn't panic. She calculated. In less than a minute, Elena had evaluated every factor that could save lives. Both engines were dead. Hydraulic pressure was failing. The cabin altitude was rising dangerously. The aircraft was losing speed, and the ground was approaching far too quickly. But she had training that went beyond commercial standards. She had tactical experience, honed during years of classified missions she rarely discussed. Every decision had to be precise. Every maneuver measured. Every second counted. With limited control, she guided the aircraft toward the nearest possible landing zone, an abandoned military airstrip that appeared almost like a dot on her navigation display. It was a long shot. The runway was narrow, cracked, partially overgrown and surrounded by open desert. But it was their only chance. She communicated her intentions to air traffic control as calmly as she could manage, though she knew even the controllers had never faced a situation like this. Flight 917, you're descending too rapidly. Have you considered ejection? A voice asked, almost incredulously. Elena's fingers tightened on the yoke. She refused. There was no question. There were 180 souls behind her. Passengers who trusted her life to her expertise. Crew members counting on her leadership. And families who expected their loved ones to arrive safely. To eject would be to abandon them. She would not. Minutes felt like hours. The plane shuddered violently as it entered a downdraft, and the wind shear threatened to flip the fuselage. She fought against the aircraft with every ounce of strength she had, adjusting flaps, stabilizing the wings, and gently coaxing the nose up when gravity demanded it down. Sweat dripped down her forehead. Her mind worked in a rhythm almost separate from time, calculating glide paths, angles of approach, and brake distances. Meanwhile, chaos continued to unfold in the cabin. Passengers were clutching seats, some sobbing, others whispering prayers. A teenage boy clung to his mother, eyes wide with disbelief. Flight attendants moved up and down the aisles, repeating calming phrases they barely believed themselves. All the while, the aircraft's descent rate was terrifyingly high. Elena's co-pilot monitored instruments and read off numbers in a shaky voice. But it was Elena who made the final calls. She adjusted thrust reversers, aligned the nose wheel, and prepared for the impact that was inevitable. She thought about every landing she had ever made, every simulation she had practiced, and every rule she had memorized. But nothing could have prepared her for this. The stakes were not her own life, but the lives of everyone on board. She whispered a silent mantra to herself. Not today. Not on my watch. And then she saw it. The runway, faintly visible in the desert heat, a thin line that could be the difference between survival and disaster. She guided the aircraft carefully, feathering controls, tilting wings, and holding the descent to the exact necessary speed. Every inch mattered. Every second counted. The plane hit the runway hard. Sparks flew as metal met asphalt. Tires screeched, brakes screamed, and the fuselage shuddered violently. Passengers screamed, some from terror, some from relief, and some too stunned to scream at all. The aircraft skidded forward, every meter a test of engineering and human skill. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity compressed into seconds, the aircraft stopped. Silence fell, a heavy, almost surreal quiet. The cabin smelled of smoke and fear. But everyone was alive. 180 lives had been saved. Medics rushed to the scene. Passengers spilled into ambulances, and helicopters circled overhead, documenting the miraculous landing. But Captain Elena Cross remained calm, her hands steady on the controls, breathing slowly, methodically. She had done what no one thought possible. And yet, she said nothing. She didn't celebrate. She didn't give interviews. She walked down the aisle, nodded quietly to her crew, and left the aircraft as if it were just another day at work. No one outside that plane would understand the depth of her focus, the intensity of her calculations, or the sheer courage it took to guide 180 people through what was arguably the most dangerous scenario in aviation history. Air traffic control replayed recordings in disbelief. The flight data would later show maneuvers that mirrored military-level evasive tactics, techniques Elena had learned during years of classified operations that were never meant to be applied to civilian flights. It was precision, skill, and composure on a level most could only dream of. And yet, despite the attention and praise that would soon follow in news reports and aviation journals, Elena chose silence. For her, the mission was complete. Lives were safe. Nothing more needed to be said. But little did she know, the world had noticed. Behind the headlines and media frenzy, elite military networks began scanning her flight logs, analyzing her every move. The techniques she had employed were classified, known only to a handful of top pilots, who operated aircraft far faster, far deadlier, and far more dangerous than any commercial airliner. They recognized the precision, the timing, the split-second decision-making, and when her call sign appeared in military databases, long retired, long forgotten, it raised questions. Captain Elena Cross wasn't just an airline pilot. She was something more, something the world would soon have to reckon with. But in that moment, standing on a tarmac with 180 lives saved, she remained silent, calm, focused, steady. Because heroes don't always speak. Sometimes, they act. And what she had just done would echo through the skies forever. The descent was terrifyingly fast, far faster than any commercial aircraft should ever approach the ground. Flight 9119 had transformed from a routine journey into a high-stakes battle against gravity, physics, and sheer circumstance. Outside the cockpit windows, clouds blurred into streaks of white and gray, whipped violently by the wind. Inside, chaos reigned. Wind shear, a sudden violent shift in the atmosphere slammed against the wings, jerking the plane violently. The fuselage groaned under stress, metal twisting and straining against the forces it had been designed to withstand, but only to a limit. Hydraulics, the very lifeblood of the aircraft's control surfaces, began to fail. Elena could feel the subtle differences in resistance, the way the yoke resisted her commands in unpredictable ways. Every input she made had to be deliberate. One miscalculation could flip the aircraft, sending 180 lives hurtling into oblivion. Passengers were screaming. Some clutched each other, whispering desperate prayers. Others screamed at the top of their lungs, their fear unfiltered. raw. A mother tried to soothe her baby, but the infant only cried louder, echoing the chaos around them. Flight attendants ran down the aisles, clinging to whatever authority they had left, instructing passengers to fasten seatbelts, to remain calm, to breathe, but even they were terrified. Yet, in the cockpit, Captain Elena Cross was the eye of the storm. Her face was calm, expressionless, even as the aircraft lurched violently. Her eyes scanned every instrument, every dial, every readout, absorbing data at an astonishing rate. Muscle memory guided her hands with precision, almost instinctively correcting for turbulence, adjusting flaps, manipulating the yoke, nudging the rudder pedals, all in perfect coordination. She didn't speak. She didn't panic. She simply acted. Minutes stretched into agonizingly long seconds as the ground drew closer, every passing moment increasing the stakes. The abandoned military runway, barely visible through the haze, loomed ahead, a fragile lifeline. Its cracked surface was unforgiving, its length marginal, and the surrounding desert offered no margin for error. But it was their only hope. Her co-pilot, pale and shaking, called out readings and figures, but Elena barely registered them. She had already calculated glide paths, descent angles, and touchdown points. Every adjustment was deliberate, minute, and measured. She could feel the wind resistance changing as the aircraft approached the strip, each gust threatening to throw them off course. One wrong movement, and the plane could skid off the tarmac or flip entirely. Inside the cabin, screams were punctuated by the metallic groaning of the fuselage. Sparks flickered as wiring rubbed against stressed panels. The smell of ozone and smoke filled the air. Passengers clutched at seats, hands knotted, knuckles white. Some pressed faces to windows, hoping for a glimpse of land, of salvation, while others closed their eyes, unable to watch the inevitable impact. The landing gear deployed, the wheels extended like fragile lifelines reaching for the ground. The hydraulics strained, groaning audibly. Elena guided the plane with steady hands, aligning it perfectly with the runway despite the gusts of wind and the unpredictable turbulence. The first contact with the asphalt sent a jolt through the aircraft. Sparks flew where metal scraped against concrete. The tires screamed against the runway. But Elena maintained control. She feathered the brakes, slowed descent, adjusted the nose, and absorbed every shock with skill born of years of experience, both commercial and classified. Passengers' screams escalated to cries of sheer terror, then abruptly shifted as the plane continued to remain upright, sliding along the tarmac rather than spinning or flipping. Some passengers began to whisper prayers of gratitude, unsure if they were relieved or still in shock. Flight attendants moved down the aisles, checking on those around them, offering quiet reassurances, though their own hands shook with adrenaline. Seconds ticked by like hours. The aircraft skidded, juddered, groaned, and then, finally, the plane slowed. Its forward momentum decreased. The cacophony of alarms, metallic screeches, and screaming gradually faded into a tense, heavy silence. The plane had stopped. 180 lives had been saved. For a moment, no one moved. The stillness was surreal. A stunned hush replaced the chaos, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Some passengers opened their eyes slowly, glancing at each other in disbelief. Had they really survived? The plane, battered but intact, seemed almost miraculous in its resilience. Outside, medics rushed to the scene, their boots crunching on gravel as they moved with urgency and precision. Stretcher teams prepared for the worst, but found relief in the absence of fatalities. Ambulances lined the perimeter, sirens blaring, lights flashing, ready to whisk the shaken passengers to safety. News helicopters hovered overhead, capturing live footage of the aircraft that had defied death. The world was about to witness the extraordinary. But in the cockpit, Elena Cross remained composed. Her hands rested lightly on the controls. Her breathing was even, deliberate. She allowed herself only the briefest exhale, a silent acknowledgement that the mission was complete. She looked at her co-pilot, who met her gaze with wide eyes, disbelief mingled with relief. Everyone's alive," he whispered. Elena nodded once, simply. No celebration, no tears, no words. She knew her role was done, and there was no need for applause. The passengers were safe. That was enough. As the first responders entered the plane, Elena gathered her things and walked down the aisle. Passengers turned to see her, searching for recognition, for gratitude, for even a smile. She offered none. She simply gave a quiet nod to the crew and exited the aircraft. No interviews, no media statements, no speeches. She vanished from the tarmac as if she had never been there at all. The headlines would later call it miraculous, extraordinary, unprecedented. Aviation experts would debate how the landing was possible. Flight data would be analyzed endlessly, frame by frame, as analysts tried to comprehend the precision required to bring the aircraft down without loss of life. But Elena would not be part of any of that. She did not seek fame. She did not crave recognition. For her, the act itself, the saving of 180 lives, was its own reward. Yet her disappearance from the public eye did not mean she had vanished entirely. Military radar and intelligence networks had taken notice. The techniques she had employed, the precision of her maneuvers, mirrored those used in advanced fighter operations. Classified protocols, long retired from active use, taught only to a select few pilots. Her execution of these moves was flawless, as if she had been trained for this moment long before it occurred. A retired colonel, reviewing the landing footage in a secure facility, froze the screen. "That's Valkyrie," he muttered under his breath. The call sign, long thought to belong to a ghost pilot from classified operations, was unmistakable. Somehow, she had applied that elite, combat-level training to a commercial airliner. Somehow she had survived, and saved hundreds of lives in the process. The implications were staggering. The military would want to debrief her. Analysts would dissect every input she had made. Flight schools would study the footage for decades. But for Elena Cross, none of that mattered. The passengers were safe. The crew was safe. The plane, battered and bruised, had served its purpose. As she walked away, the desert wind brushing against her face, Elena allowed herself one thought, a rare flicker of personal reflection. She had faced death and stared it down. Guided by calm, focus, and training, she had succeeded where others might have failed. And yet, she did not feel invincible. She felt only responsibility, discipline, and the quiet satisfaction of duty fulfilled. And somewhere in the background, unnoticed by the world watching from afar, military radar systems logged every movement, every maneuver, every decision she had made. The world might not know her name yet, but the skies, and those who watched them closely, would never forget. Days passed. The world moved on. The headlines praised Captain Elena Cross for her miraculous landing, her unshakable composure, and the unprecedented feat of skill that saved 180 lives. Television segments replayed the landing in slow motion, commentators dissecting every second, analyzing the physics of the glide, the skill of her maneuvers, and the perfect timing of the touchdown. Social media exploded with admiration and disbelief. Hashtags trending worldwide. Memes celebrating the pilot's calmness circulated within hours. News anchors called it a miracle. Airlines declared her a hero. And yet, Elena Cross said nothing. No interviews. No statements. No speeches. She stayed away from cameras, avoided reporters, and returned to her routine flights as if the entire episode had never occurred. To the public she had vanished. To the media she was untouchable, unreachable, a silent legend. But somewhere else, in a secure military command center, the story was very different. The screens flickered under the dim glow of fluorescent lights. Rows of analysts leaning over consoles, eyes fixed on flight data records. Frame by frame, the landing was being dissected with surgical precision. Every angle, every movement, every input was logged, measured, and analyzed. For most of the analysts, the landing was extraordinary, But that was just the beginning. Her control inputs didn't just match the procedures of a commercial pilot, they exceeded them. They mirrored maneuvers that were classified, techniques reserved for elite fighter pilots, taught in top-secret programs for F-22 Raptors, stealth operations, and aerial combat exercises. These were maneuvers most commercial aviators had never seen, never learned, never imagined applying to a civilian aircraft. And yet, there they were, executed flawlessly. The room fell silent as one analyst froze the screen. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitation clear. "Wait, that call sign," he murmured, almost under his breath, staring at the logged flight data. Other analysts crowded around. "What do you mean?" one asked, squinting at the monitor. "Valkyrie," he whispered again. "That call sign, it hasn't been active in decades. It belonged to a retired F-22 pilot. Classified missions. Redacted operations. They disappeared years ago, never officially retired. Just gone." The team exchanged uneasy glances. Few people on the planet were aware of Valkyrie's identity. And yet here it was, embedded in the logs of a commercial airliner's extraordinary flight. They cross-checked old military archives, sifting through black-inked mission reports, declassified flight logs, and redacted personnel files. Each entry they uncovered told a story of skill, precision, and secrecy. Top-level reconnaissance, combat simulations, classified intercepts. One name appeared repeatedly, always behind the call sign, always operating under strict secrecy. Captain Elena Cross. A murmur ran through the command center. Analysts replayed the landing over and over. They compared it to archived footage of stealth jet maneuvers. Every control input, the precise angles, the calculated adjustments under high-stress conditions, the coordination of throttle, flaps, and rudder matched exactly. It was uncanny, impossible even for a commercial pilot to execute such maneuvers with a passenger-laden airliner. "This isn't just skill," said one officer, voice low, almost reverent. "This is training, combat level, elite training." She didn't just save lives, she performed an impossible feat, the likes of which we've only seen in simulations and fighter operations. They traced her past. Military records, classified operations, redacted missions. There were gaps, years unaccounted for. The kind of gaps only found in pilots who had been recruited for top-secret programs, missions that required skill beyond human limits. And then it clicked. She had not vanished from the world. She had simply returned, quietly, to the skies of civilian life, blending in among ordinary pilots, concealing extraordinary ability. Valkyrie. The call sign carried weight, reverence, even fear, within classified military circles. Any pilot who had earned it was trained to the highest standard, capable of flying in combat theaters with absolute precision, and trusted to execute missions that were literally impossible for most humans to comprehend. To see that call sign applied to a commercial landing left the analysts stunned. Elena Cross was not merely a hero of a single flight. She was a ghost from a forgotten chapter of military aviation, a pilot who had walked away from classified operations, from high-stakes combat missions, from a life of secrecy that demanded absolute precision. And yet, here she was, saving 180 civilians with the exact same calm, exact same discipline, exact same expertise. In one corner, a young analyst whispered, almost fearfully, "She's one of them. She's Valkyrie." A senior officer nodded slowly, "Not just one of them. She is the best of them. And now, the world thinks she's a civilian pilot. They don't know what she's capable of." They pored over every movement Elena had made during the descent, the approach, and the landing. Each adjustment was deliberate, almost surgical. The timing of the throttles, the small flicks of the yoke to compensate for wind shear, the subtle shifts in control surfaces to stabilize the aircraft, all executed with precision that seemed otherworldly. They compared it to decades-old footage of Valkyrie performing combat maneuvers in F-22s. The similarities were unmistakable. Every motion, every instinct, mirrored the techniques she had mastered in military operations. For the analysts, it was a revelation. The landing was not just miraculous, it was impossible without that kind of elite training. Every journalist, every headline, every viral clip of the landing captured the outcome, but none of them understood the depth of skill, the years of preparation, and the precision required to achieve it. Elena had operated in silence, as she always did, and yet her actions spoke volumes. A meeting was called in the highest levels of military command. The footage and data were presented to officers who had only ever read about Valkyrie. "We have confirmation," one analyst said. "She is who we feared and admired decades ago. Captain Elena Cross, formerly Valkyrie. The pilot we thought disappeared. Alive, active, and operating under civilian cover." There was a pause, a silence heavy with respect. Few humans had ever seen Valkyrie in action. Fewer had lived to tell the story. And now, 180 civilians had just been saved by the same hands. Elena Cross, civilian pilot, ghost of classified military operations. Valkyrie was both hero and enigma. She had performed the impossible, saved hundreds, and disappeared from public view without so much as a word. But in the quiet chambers of the military, analysts knew the truth. She was no ordinary pilot. She was a phantom of the skies, a living testament to skill, discipline, and courage. And the world had yet to fully understand the implications. The command center continued to buzz, analysts replaying and reanalyzing footage, comparing every angle, every control input. Every frame confirmed the impossible, the techniques she had used, the precision with which she executed them, and the calm decisiveness under pressure. All matched classified standards that were not publicly known. She had blended the artistry of elite combat piloting with the responsibility of civilian flight. In that moment, Captain Elena Cross became more than a hero. She became a legend, not just for saving lives, but for what she represented. Discipline, perfection, and mastery of the skies. A ghost who had walked among civilians, invisible yet deadly precise, who emerged only when the world needed her most. No one in the command center spoke. They didn't need to. They had watched history unfold on a grainy monitor, witnessed skill beyond comprehension, and realized that the pilot known to the public as Elena Cross was a phantom from the shadows of elite military aviation, a ghost, in every sense of the word. And somewhere, far above the desert and the media frenzy, she continued her quiet life, unaware of how closely her every move was being analyzed. She had saved lives, yes. She had executed the impossible. But she had done so silently. Because heroes and ghosts often remain unseen. 2 weeks had passed since the miraculous landing of Flight 917. The world was moving on, with headlines fading and social media chatter replaced by the next viral moment. For most people, the story of Captain Elena Cross had already become legend. Yet she remained invisible. No interviews, no accolades, no public appearances. Her life continued with quiet normalcy. She returned to flying, taking routine flights, cargo runs, and domestic routes that no one would ever notice. On this particular morning, Elena was piloting a quiet cargo route over the endless desert. The sun had barely risen, casting a golden haze over the barren landscape below. There were no passengers, no cameras, no expectations, just the hum of the aircraft, the steady rhythm of the engine, and the familiar solitude of the cockpit. She adjusted her course slightly, scanning her instruments, checking the horizon. It was routine, predictable, safe. But routine, she had learned, was only a fragile illusion. Without warning, her radio crackled to life, a voice sharp, authoritative, impossible to ignore. "Unidentified aircraft, you are entering restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately." Elena's hand hovered over the microphone. She glanced at the instruments, verifying altitude, position, and speed. There was no other traffic on the radar. Nothing in the system suggested that anyone should be monitoring her path. And yet, the voice persisted. Calm but commanding, it carried weight. Before she could respond, 2 F-22 Raptors appeared, slicing through the sky with silent precision. They flanked her aircraft, one on the left, one on the right, wings almost parallel. Their formation was perfect, their presence imposing yet strangely respectful. They didn't maneuver aggressively. They didn't fire warning flares. They simply hovered in their deadly, silent formation, a testament to skill, discipline, and control. Elena's heart raced, not from fear, but recognition. She had seen these jets before, in simulations, in classified exercises, in training that few pilots ever completed, and the coordination of these Raptors, the exact spacing, the perfect alignment, the silent communication between the pilots, was familiar. Too familiar. Then one voice broke through the radio static. Clear. Calm. Commanding, yet almost intimate. Valkyrie. This is Raptor Lead. Elena closed her eyes. Her fingers tightened on the controls, but not in panic. It was a reflexive moment of acknowledgement. Valkyrie. The call sign she had not used publicly in years. The call sign she thought belonged only to her past. The voice continued, deliberate, measured. We saw what you did. Command wants you to know. The skies still remember you. She opened her eyes slowly, taking in the sight of the Raptors. Their wings dipped in unison, a salute that was both formal and deeply personal. The acknowledgement was not just for the landing of Flight 919, it was for decades of discipline, training, and sacrifice. For missions she had long left behind, operations erased from public memory, yet forever etched in the minds of those who had served beside her. The jets didn't stay long. After a few heartbeats, they banked, engines roaring softly, and disappeared into the clouds as silently as they had arrived. The desert returned to its vast emptiness. The hum of Elena's cargo aircraft filled the void. The sky was hers alone again. Calm, serene, almost ordinary. But Elena Cross didn't smile right away. She exhaled slowly, feeling the tension of weeks ease from her shoulders. She adjusted the throttle, straightened her course, and glanced down at the desert below. Then, finally, she allowed herself to smile, a small private gesture of recognition, of pride, of understanding. She had been acknowledged not by the world, not by reporters, not by the millions watching from afar, but by those who knew the truth, those who had trained her, those who had watched her rise above impossibility and master the skies in ways that very few could comprehend. Her thoughts drifted briefly to the 180 passengers she had saved, to the families whose lives had been spared, to the crew who had followed her lead without hesitation. She had done her duty. She had protected life. And though the world might not fully understand, those who mattered, the ones trained to recognize true skill, had noticed. Elena thought about silence, about restraint, about the quiet power of action. She had always preferred it. Words were often unnecessary. Heroism, true heroism, was measured in results, not recognition. And in that moment, she felt the quiet satisfaction of having done exactly what she was meant to do. The desert stretched endlessly below her, the wind calm above. She leaned back slightly in her seat, feeling the aircraft respond smoothly under her control. Her thoughts wandered briefly to her past life as Valkyrie, missions shrouded in secrecy, maneuvers performed in the dead of night, operations that had never seen the light of day. She realized that in saving 180 lives, she had not just completed a civilian flight, she had merged her past and present, the soldier and the pilot, into a seamless act of precision and courage. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows over the dunes. The desert shimmered in the heat, stretching endlessly in all directions. Elena's mind cleared, as it always did at altitude, leaving only calm, focus, and control. She adjusted her course, began her descent toward the next waypoint, and allowed herself one last glance at the sky she had just shared with the Raptors. Somewhere in the clouds, she thought, Valkyrie lives on. Not as a legend, not as a story, not as a call sign, but as a presence, a ghost in the skies, always watching, always capable, always ready. The world below would continue its rush, headlines would fade, reporters would search for heroes, social media would celebrate or forget, but the skies, those infinite, ever-changing, unpredictable skies, remembered, and so did she. Elena flew on in silence, but this time, Her smile lingered. It wasn't pride. It wasn't triumph. It was recognition, a quiet acknowledgement that the world was larger than the headlines, and that some truths existed only in the space between clouds and sky. She adjusted her controls, checked her instruments, and eased the cargo aircraft forward. No more surprises. No more immediate danger. Just flight. Just freedom. Just the quiet rhythm of life in the sky. And somewhere, far above the world that knew her only as Captain Elena Cross, 2 F-22 Raptors faded into the clouds, leaving a silent message in their wake: excellence endures. Valor is remembered, and ghosts, when necessary, always return to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Elena smiled once more, letting the warmth of the morning sun wash over her. For the first time in weeks, she felt the weight of her actions lift slightly, replaced with a quiet peace. She had faced the impossible, mastered it, and returned to the skies on her own terms. The horizon stretched endlessly, a ribbon of gold and blue. The desert below whispered in heat and wind, and Captain Elena Cross, once Valkyrie, once a ghost, once a hero unknown to the world, soared onward, alone, silent, and unstoppable. This time she allowed herself to enjoy it. Because some heroes don't need applause. Some heroes just need to fly. And in that flight, she had found her victory.